Okay, so thank you for joining us this evening for this webinar, which is a Girls on Track UK initiative and managed by Motorsport UK. My name is Naomi Schiff. I'm a racing driver turned broadcaster, and I am your host for tonight's webinar. Tonight's theme is press officers, and I'm delighted to be joined by three outstanding ladies who I will introduce you to in a few seconds. But before we get started, let's just go through a little bit of housekeeping. Firstly, this recording will be posted later today on the Girls on Track UK community page on Facebook, as well as on the Motorsports UK YouTube channel, where you can watch all the previous webinars as well. We received a number of questions from members already, which we're going to go through tonight as much as we can. But for those of you watching, please feel free to use the Q&A function, which is just below on your screens, where you can send some questions through. And depending on how much time we have at the end of the session, we will try to get through as many of those as well. Now, without further ado, let's get into the introduction of our panelists and our stars for the session tonight, starting with Ann Bradshaw. So Annie is a hugely experienced and influential woman in motorsport and has been working in the industry for 51 years this year. Her career experience is extremely varied, and she has worked in many different racing series, including 15 years with Williams, and is now the press officer for W Series, which she's been doing since 2019. So there isn't much that Annie doesn't know about this role, so we are certainly looking forward to her sharing her experiences with us. Up next, Fiona Miller. Fiona is also a motorsports comms specialist with particular expertise in the World Endurance Championship. Fiona has over 35 years, over the last 35 years, worked in media and PR, in industries, teams, and drivers, and was until recently head of communications for WEC. So Fiona is the first female to be awarded the ACO's Prix de la Communication by a panel of journalists at Le Mans. Wow. Now, Megan, last but definitely not least, Megan has joined the award-winning content and comms agency SQN recently in October 2021 as a content and communications coordinator. Her role incorporates on-site support as a press officer for Hyundai Motorsport and for support for customers in the WTCR, which is the FIA World Touring Car Cup. So from organizing media schedules for drivers, creating engaging content, and conducting interviews and writing press releases, Meg's versatile skill set and passion for the sport shines through and through. Meg has previously has experience in British F4 and is the W Series correspondent for the Pit Box podcast. That is a mouthful, ladies. We cannot wait to hear more from you. So as I mentioned earlier, we have received a list of questions from Girls on Track UK members. And so if you guys are ready, I would like to dive straight in. Does that work for you?
Off you go.
Absolutely, yeah.
I guess the best place to start is from the very beginning. So maybe ladies, you can each give us an idea about how you kickstarted your careers as press officers. Maybe we can start with you, Fiona.
I started by working for a PR agency that happened to specialize in motorsport. One of the first jobs I had to do was to, as a quite lowly account executive, was to act as Ms. Bradshaw's driver at the British Grand Prix because she'd done something horrible to her knee and couldn't drive or whatever. So that forged a lifelong friendship, and Annie has been we ended up sharing an office. We ended up working both for Williams. She was doing the PR, I was looking after Mobile One as a sort of, a hospitality and that side of things. And then really we've just sort of gone on from there. So I started with an agency and then went to work for various teams and industry and drivers and championships as the years have gone on.
Fantastic. What about you, Meg?
So I'm still very early on in my career, so sort of still very fresh out of uni. I was working in brand marketing beforehand, so I worked with Cadbury for a year, and sort of it was during the pandemic where I was like, I love motorsport, I need to do something that I really love, and I joined SQN in October last year, and there was just an opportunity to sort of become the on-site press officer for Hyundai, supporting the WTCR customers. and sort of grabbed the opportunity. And yeah, I'm hoping it's the start of a very long career in motorsport and as a press officer.
We hope so. Maybe it'll be quite as long as yours, Annie. What about you?
Well, obviously I think I was 12 when I started in this motorsport. So it must have been if I've done 51 years. But no, I mean, I started actually, I was a journalist by profession, and I got very bored with birth, deaths and marriages at a local newspaper. So I went to work for the British Racing and Sports Car Club and organised race meetings. And it started from there. I also then went to Autosport as their rally correspondent. But when I really got into PR, was say when I shared an office with Fiona, and I was looking after the PR for Williams. And over the years, I've gone back there. I think I've been there about 5 times, because every time somebody has a baby, I go back there, or I have a baby driver to look after. But in the meantime, I've also looked after a lot of championships for BMW, Formula BMW, DTM, World Touring Cars, and now I've been with W Series since 2019, which is a lot of fun. I love it. There's a great group of girls there. I mean, I'm not. I can't say I'm a raging feminist, and we all have to be better than the men and that. But I do feel that we've been underrepresented, and it's just lovely to work with people like Naomi, who has just blossomed with W Series, and we've got 18 great girls. So yeah, I think I've done most things, and I've been very lucky. It's been a great 51 years since I was 12.
Well, firstly, thank you, Annie. I guess part of my success has got to be the fact that I was one of your baby drivers. That definitely has helped, and it's been a pleasure to work alongside you. Now, ladies, obviously motorsports is deemed to be a very glamorous sport, and in fact, it kind of is. But can you guys get into the nitty-gritty of what your day-to-day jobs look like? Is it all glamorous, or is it sometimes a little bit tedious? Who would like to go first?
I'll give it a go. Because I'm working with an agency. Obviously, my day-to-day isn't just working as a press officer, so I have a lot of other clients that I deal with on the day-to-day as well. And actually, it was something I didn't realize that you could do when I first thought about it. I thought you had to work for a team, and that's all you did. So it's really fun being able to have other clients and sort of be able to switch off from the whole press officer side of things sometimes. As it is very glamorous. Motorsport is glamorous, but at the same time it's very tiring. I think, again, I've just started, so it's all very new to me. So I'm coming home from weekends when I'm away traveling, and I've still got to do the day-to-day while I'm traveling as well. So it's great, and it's an amazing opportunity to be able to do it. But also there is a side of it where it's like how you have on Instagram, that everything's filtered, everything's lovely, but at the same time it's a lot of hard work. And I'm sure both Annie and Fiona can agree with me that there's so much that goes on behind the scenes that you maybe don't realize until you work in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the important thing is to remember that the fans see cars on track and the drivers, and they see those things, but they forget that we start at, say, if the cars are on track at 10 o'clock, we're starting at 7 o'clock in the morning, getting everything ready. So they're much longer days. So we're there before everything starts and there when everything's finished. So it's not just a matter of, there's a practice session, and I think the problem is that a lot of people have seen us stand there behind a driver with the dictaphone machine, and people used to see me standing on the grid with an umbrella over Damon Hill. That's not what we do. I mean, I think some people just thought I was an umbrella holder, but it's making sure that you have a plan in place, because there's so many different things that happen during a day. You have to make sure the drivers know what media they're doing, they're briefed, are there on time, the media are there on time, and just it's like clockwork. You have to make sure that everything happens, because if you overrun, you've got engineers screaming at you, you've got people saying they've got to be in the car. So it's a matter of, it's almost a military precision thing, because if you get something wrong with what you want them to do, you've got so many people onto you, and the drivers have to know what they're doing, the team have to know what they're doing. So it's a lot of forward planning and a lot of early mornings and late evenings.
Well, I've just come back from Le Mans, from the 24 hours of Le Mans, and I'm now, having left the organisation side, I'm now working for a small team, which is nice in a lot of ways, but it also means that you get involved in a hell of a lot of different areas than you thought you would. So for my week, 10 days at Le Mans, it included organisation of media events, or writing of press releases, some social media, taking drivers to sponsor events, because it's only small, so there's only you that's doing most of this. What else did I do? I took mechanics to the medical centre, because I'm one of the only 2 French speakers in the team. You get pulled in lots of different directions, organisation of anything and everything. And I started work, I got up at 7 o'clock on Saturday morning, and I went to bed at about 8:30 on Sunday night. So that was, that's not glamorous, let's say. That's not glamorous.
No, that's true. Now, we all know that motorsports is obviously a very male-dominated industry, and that's part of the reason why we're all here right now having this conversation. So I'd like to ask you ladies, maybe during your experience, some longer, some shorter, what has been the biggest obstacle that you've had to face as a woman in the sport?
Well, I'll start then. I don't mind starting. And I have to put my hand up and say, I haven't experienced too many obstacles, because I think I'm pretty dogged, and I'm not going to let anybody come in and put me down. But having said that, I mean, when I first started, for instance, in Formula One, there weren't Formula One press officers at teams. So I actually came in there and carved my way through into a job that nobody knew even existed. I think, to be honest with you, I think perhaps there's more stereotypes now than there were when I first did it, because there were fewer of us. But I think it's just, you have to just be very determined in what you're doing, and not let people sideline you and think that just because you're a woman. But I haven't had a lot of male chauvinism shown towards me, but I think perhaps I was luckier, because in those days nobody was doing the job, so whether it was male or female, it was a job that didn't exist.
I think that if you work hard and do a job professionally, and you do it to the best of your ability, the obstacles should be few and far between. Because if you're doing a better job than any other person could do it, male or female, then why should obstacles keep being thrown in your path? That's perhaps a bit simplistic, but I don't think I've experienced any major obstacles, same as Annie. Certainly not for being a female doing the job. The only thing somebody said to me recently was that, well, I'm a bit intimidated when I talk to you because you're a bit fierce. but actually, I don't think that's that much of an obstacle, but there we go.
Look, I remember the time when you were known as the Duchess in the press office of the WEC, and everybody treated you with a lot of respect, and that came from the men. They said the Duchess, and the moment you walked in, they quaked with fear.
I learned it from you.
What about you, Meg?
I wouldn't say in my very short time in doing it, I've faced any obstacles. I think the main thing for me was, I've been part of Girls on Track UK for a little bit now. And it was actually being around so many women and very inspirational women and coming to these webinars that sort of helped me gain the confidence to actually go, do you know what, if I do the job well and I know what I'm doing, then no one's going to question me. As long as I'm doing the job, either a female or a male can do the job, but you've just got to do the job well, and you've got to prove that you can do it. And I think that's sort of the mindset that I've gone in with. So yeah, it's definitely thanks to this amazing community that I've sort of had that confidence to be able to do that and sort of go in and say, yep, I can do this. As long as I do my job well, then no one can really say anything.
Well, it sounds like you guys all have one thing in common. You all mentioned having a thick skin, being strong women, and standing your ground. So I think that is a part of what it takes to be successful in this type of industry. But I think it's also worth mentioning, and it's been my experience as well, that I've never felt sort of, unwanted. I've always felt welcomed and appreciated in my workplace. But it definitely takes, strong character and getting used to the laddie culture that there might be at the track. And yeah, of course, we can talk about access. That's another topic, of course. As a racing driver, the challenges are slightly different to what it would be to be a press officer, but access is obviously a big barrier for women in the sport. So yes, but thank you for sharing that with me, ladies. Now, I want to understand from your side, what skills do you think are required to be a press officer? What are the most important skills? Let's put it that way.
I think a massive ability to juggle so many different tasks in a day, to be able to talk to all sorts of different people in the right way. And the right way is something that you inevitably you learn a little bit, or you hone, let's say, as you go along. But to be able to talk to a team owner or team principal, to a sponsor, to a driver, to a mechanic, to media, I think it's an ability to be able to keep everybody happy, but at the same time keep focused on the task you have in mind, or the objective that you have in terms of your team or your driver or your sponsor or whatever.
I think.
Oh, sorry, go for it, Meg. Go for it.
Time management is a big one. You've got to get your drivers to the right places at the right time. And when it comes to scheduling things, things they're sort of very seamless. So, a driver can be on track, finish at a certain time. They've then got to go to a press conference, and then you've got to be really sharp in getting them back to the truck so they can do a debrief with the team. Like Fiona said earlier, you can get the team sort of getting quite annoyed at you if you don't have the driver there on time, as they work to the schedule like a clock. So I think time management is definitely a big one that I've learned that needs to be you need to be there sort of 5 minutes early or you're late, sort of thing.
I think you sometimes have to just expect the unexpected, because people are going to throw curveballs at you. Have a sense of humor, because the moment you lose your sense of humor, you lose your sense of perspective, and not everybody's going to want the same as you. So you have to see it from their point of view. And I mean, I suppose the nice thing is that you can put something into it. So if you get the respect of the people you're working with, and they know that like you're both saying, time management. So if they know that you've got an overall picture, and the worst thing anybody can do is think that what we do is the most important. We're part of a big machine, and remember, we're not the story. And so many people forget in all the glare of, I'm sorry to say it, but social media, that what they're doing is very special. They're just such a small cog, and just make sure that what the team is doing and your driver is doing is important, and just stand back and let them get on with it, but make sure they're properly briefed and they know what they're doing. Because, as I say, it's there's so many different things that can suddenly hit them. There's so many stories that I find that when I first came across it, that people would do this, what they call tone of voice document to give to drivers. I said, oh, God, what do they want that for? But it's so important that you make sure they know what's going on around them, because they can get caught out by the media. And we can all get caught out by the media, because they're always looking for the story you don't want them to repeat.
Certainly. I mean, I was a team manager for a very short period of time. And I think that was the first time also I learned how difficult drivers are to deal with. Like being a driver, you don't realize how difficult you are to deal with until you need to deal with racing drivers. So time management, yes, especially if you're dealing with me as a driver, completely get that. That hits home very much. Okay, now ladies, I'd like to know, something positive about your jobs. Tell us what the most rewarding part of your job is.
Oh, well, seeing something in print in a publication that you've worked hard at, or on a TV program that you've worked hard on, and it's not just something. I mean, we all know that we can ring up Motorsport magazines and give them interviews, but when if you work hard on something and you see it out there and you see what you've done in a positive light, that is to me that was so satisfying, and that that it bore the fruits of all your work, and that's perhaps one of the most positive and gratifying things for me.
I would agree that because that's something you've worked towards, and that's something that you can have as a tangible, because so much of what we do is intangible. And so I think that's a very sort of tangible part of what we do, is actually seeing sort of something in print or something on screen. But I would also say that one of the most rewarding parts is the relationships that you form, either with the media or with other press officers or with your team, with drivers or whatever, because like every industry, this is a small world, and you come across the same people over and over again. And I was given a very good bit of advice, and advice may be something we talk about later, but I was given a very good bit of advice by Andrew Marriott, who was somebody that both Anne and I worked with a long time ago. And he said that never forget that the people you meet on the way up the ladder are very often the same people you're going to meet on the way down the ladder as well. And it might not be you coming down, it might be them coming down. But if you have trodden all over somebody on the way up, they're not going to think so kindly of you as you come down. And I've never forgotten that, because you just, it's the age-old thing of treat people as you'd like to be treated yourself. And I think that's a really strong message to get across about what makes it rewarding, is because those relationships that you form and that you nurture over the years are the things that make your job effectively much easier as you go forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think for me, a very rewarding thing is, I think my first weekend as a press officer, it was sort of getting through the weekend and actually thinking, oh, I've done that. Like I've sort of planned it from the start, and I've seen it all the way through to the end. And it was when I was on my flight home, and obviously I was going through my laptop and, closing everything down from the weekend, and sort of said to myself, I've done that. Like that is something I've done. And again, like both Annie and Fiona have said, having that tangible thing of seeing your name somewhere is a big help. And also having, your drivers come up and say, oh, thank you for doing that. You've done, thanks for keeping me in shape this weekend and making me know where I need to go. And that's sort of a very rewarding moment, I think.
Very nice. Okay, cool. Well, next, ladies, I think these two questions are very similar. So I'm going to kind of put them both to you, but feel free to answer them all at once. The first one is, did your life change since you joined Motorsport? And the second one is, what skills have you gained through that work, and how has it helped you in your day-to-day life?
Oh.
Lots of thinking going on.
I don't know. I mean, I suppose because it was so long ago for me that my life changed through motorsport, but I mean, it was much more rewarding. I mean, I would say I was a journalist by profession, and when you work on a local newspaper, you do births, deaths, and marriages. Things can get a little bit repetitive, and it's never repetitive. I mean, even though people say, "Oh, well, I've got another 23 F1 races," everyone is different. So you're learning all the time. That's a difficult one. And the second, I just think that I mean, we are so lucky to be in the jobs we are in. We never wake up and think, oh, I'm doing the same as I did yesterday, or I'll be doing the same tomorrow. So I think that that's the important thing, is that it's just totally moving, and you're going to have a different scenario, even if you do the same races, nothing's going to ever be the same. So it just teaches you to, as I say before, expect the unexpected and rejoice in this and grab it and just go off and do it, and not worry about it, and just have confidence that that's what you've got to do, and you've got all those people who are looking for you to do it, and get on with it.
I think it's been rewarding in the sense that I've traveled to places I would never have traveled to before, I would have envisaged traveling to before. I've met the most extraordinary people, inspirational people, who've got stories that have had books written about them, which is just amazing. I met my husband through motor racing. He's a race engineer. I guess that's probably one of the most rewarding parts. Don't tell him I said I guess. But anyway, there we go.
I'm going to tell him that. He won't.
Yeah, it's given, as Anne says, every day is different, and I think that's an extremely rare thing to have in a lot of areas these days. Most people, if they have a job that takes them into an office, they do a repetitive kind of job, and they get to the end of the day and they may be satisfied with what they've done, but it's been very much sort of formulaic. It's been very much the same, whereas as we all agree, every day is completely different.
Life has definitely gotten a lot more busier since starting motorsport. I feel like I'm never in one place for longer than a week, 2 weeks, and my suitcase has definitely been used a lot more than it ever has been. So that's been really great, because like Fiona said, I've had the chance to travel to some countries I probably never would have done. I got to tick one of the tracks off my bucket list. So I went to Nürburgring Nordschleife for the race Germany a couple of weeks ago. So that was sort of something I've always wanted to do, a track I've always wanted to go to. So
isn't that just an incredible event?
It was insane. Like, I've never seen so many fans at a racetrack before. And as someone who has gone to races for years, I've never seen that many people. So it was on a different level, I think. Especially,
you've got to go to Le Mans. You have to go to Le Mans.
I'm again, that's another one that's on the bucket list. So I'm hoping in a few years that maybe that will happen. But I think motorsport and this job has definitely improved my confidence. Sort of people I know who I knew before I worked in this job have said, wow, you're like a completely different person now. Years ago, I would never put myself in situations like this. I wouldn't speak in front of people. And actually, it's sort of helped me find my purpose almost, and helped me find myself. So it's very rewarding, and I feel like it's definitely helped me come out of my shell a lot more.
Fantastic. Sounds like really great experiences. I know that it's changed my life completely as well, and that I've gained so many skills that I feel like can be, put into your everyday life so much. Like you said, time management, just being able to expect the unexpected, being in a position to know that nothing is for sure. And so you appreciate every moment, every minute. And yeah, we're very lucky to do what we do. So just, make the most of it and enjoy every moment. Now, ladies, the last question I'm going to ask you, which is a little bit about your backgrounds before we move into insight for future candidates, is what has been the most unexpected challenge in your role so far?
I was thinking about this earlier on, and I couldn't honestly, I think the unexpected challenge is expecting the unexpected, as we've talked about before. You have, at the start of each day, you may have a very detailed plan, but you've got no idea where you're going to end up at the end of the day in terms of what you've achieved, where things have gone, the directions you might have done an interview or organized an interview with a driver and a publication, and it could have gone off in a complete, or opened up a completely new door to something different. It's just everything is yeah, I don't think it's not a challenge, but it's unexpected, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I had it a couple of weeks ago, one of my races, and the races actually got cancelled 45 minutes before we were due to go on track for safety concerns. So it was my first weekend sort of by myself, and it was very much like, right, okay, what do I do? How, who do I get the messages from? How do I, what facts are there? What can I tell people? What can't I tell people? And it was one of those situations that you don't ever envision yourself being in. You sort of hear stories about it, but you don't ever go, oh, that's something I'm going to have to deal with. So it was very unexpected, but it's sort of, I think everyone around you is there to help you. I felt at that moment, am I asking a silly question? But actually it was a case of, no, everyone wants to get the same message across to the people who are watching, and to fans, and to, sponsors and things like that. So it was sort of, going through the motions of what to do in that. So it's definitely something I'll keep in mind for if anything like that happens ever again.
Great.
Yeah, I have to say, on a sober note, obviously, for me, it's a driver dying.
Yeah.
The unexpected challenge, and something that you never even think you're going to have to deal with. But when you do have to deal with it, you go onto autopilot. And that, to me, is the worst. That's the worst thing about a sport you love. And you have to accept that. And it's awful to say it, but every time you see your drivers get in the car and go out, you have to think, oh, one of them might not come back. And it's something that you don't think about, because you just see them, you think, oh, they're great, they're going to have it, but you have to, that's the thing you have to be prepared for. And then you have to know how you can control your own emotions and look after other people, not even the driver and thing, but everybody else that you have to deal with, because that's the most unexpected thing and the worst thing you have to do, because you have to remember that everybody in a team is going to be affected, like the mechanic who was working on the car, or the family, and that sort of thing. And I think if you can just get yourself in a mind that you then go on autopilot, and that's the worst that you could be faced with, but you have to support everybody.
Mm-hmm. Well, we know motorsports is obviously a very dangerous sport, and it's moved a lot in a positive direction over the last couple of years, but we know that anything can still happen. Freak incidents do happen, and as you mentioned, Annie, it doesn't necessarily have to be the drivers, it can also be the pit crew. These things sadly do happen. But now let's move on to a more positive note. It seems to be that there are loads and loads of women and men out there who are very interested in becoming press officers, judging by the amount of questions we got about entering into this kind of job role. So I've got a list of questions here, and I'm going to go through some of the Q&A questions as well, because some people have put some really great ones out there. But let's just start with, what is the best way to get into this kind of role? What studies does it take, or what do you think is the best way to get yourself in the best position to get a job in the sport?
I don't know which one of us wants to go first. I mean, I do spend a lot of time talking to young girls at university who are doing courses in media training and that sort of thing. And I always point out from unfortunately, a lot of people say, oh, I want to work in Formula One. And I have to sort of point out that there are so many different ways you can get into motorsport and enjoy it, whether it be through teams, through media, through agencies. I think you just have to just be very open and prepared to go in and work hard. But there's not one thing you can say. I mean, I was a journalist, but I came in organising, then journalism, PR. But luckily, there are a lot of courses now at universities which are media type courses that you can take, and then just I mean, you have to be dogged and determined, because I think for every one job going, there's about 10,000 people wanting that job in our sport. But yeah, just try and look at those things. I mean, I know people who are in our line of work who actually came from an engineering side. So anything like that that gives you an insight into the sport and a really thought of how the sport works is going to be helpful. Yeah, I mean, I've even had catering people who have come into marketing or into PR. So look at all the different areas where people are working in the sport, and try and focus on something that you could take you into that area.
Mm-hmm.
I would also say that don't automatically assume or automatically aim for Formula One first off. You know, a lot of mechanics that work for Formula One teams have done a few years with some other team in a lower category where they've learnt their trade, they've gained a reputation for being good at what they do. And it comes down to the basics. It comes down to the basics of being punctual, being in the right place at the right time, doing your job properly. I think from a writing point of view, making sure that you spell correctly, or that you can put something in a correct format. And these might sound like really tiny things, but they're the sort of things that if you're sending a CV out, or if you're submitting a piece of work, you know, just make sure you're factually correct. All of those kind of things, I think, the end result is that you're taken seriously, you're considered in maybe a little bit of a better light than somebody else, and then you can move up the chain up to different categories, and obviously Formula One, which is the pinnacle of motorsport.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was at uni and I did media for my undergraduate degree. So I did sort of a lot of different areas of media. So I sort of built up my skill set. And at that time, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew I had those skills behind me to go in a lot of different avenues that I wanted. And I ended up doing my master's in public relations. So sort of, I feel like I've done it right. In fact, I did my degree in PR and now I'm working in PR. But something I found coming out of uni and what everywhere wanted was experience, and whether that's specific experience in motorsport or having some experience, but being able to tailor that so that you don't have to have written a motorsport press release to be a motorsport press officer. You could have just written a really good piece of work or written for something else. And as long as you can prove that you can do it, you know, there is a way in. So I was really lucky and I had some experience with the Carlin F4 team. I did sort of social media for them for a weekend last year, and sort of that, having that in my CV, as soon as I started applying for jobs after that, was sort of getting picked up a little bit more, because I had that specific experience that they could see that I'd done it. And having examples of everything, I found in sort of nowadays, everywhere wants to see examples of what you can do. And that was my big challenge when I was applying for jobs. You know, anything you do, keep hold of it and keep a record of it. And when places are asked for examples, tailor it and say, oh, I've written a piece for this, or I've done some social media content for this account, but I could do this as well. And it doesn't have to be for a specific purpose. You could do it for fun and just have it there as a bank of examples that you can show that you are capable of doing that job.
Awesome. Well, you said it there, the word CV. The next question revolves around the topic of CVs. Ladies, maybe this one will go to you, Fiona and Annie. When you're looking at resumes for potential candidates in your teams, what is it that you would say stands out for a qualified candidate? And what is the best thing for them to do to get noticed and to get picked for comms jobs? And of course, Megan, if you feel like you want to add something to this, go for it.
Annie, you've hired more than I have recently, so you start.
It's a difficult one because CVs over the years have changed. I mean, CVs now is like somebody auditioning to to play a role in a soap opera sort of things, that people sell themselves more, and talk about themselves in sort of, I can do this, I can do that. I mean, to me, it's very much that, absolutely, you said, like, you've been and you've done work with the Carling team. Anybody who's got themselves out there and, as you say, done something for nothing almost. I'm always impressed when somebody says, oh yeah, well, I spent a weekend with this team, work experience, or I wrote these articles and then Autosport published them. And I always like to see that and say, I always like that the people are motorsport fans, not F1 fans. That's a big thing. But I think anybody who's got out there and of their own volition has contacted an F4 team or an F3 team or one of the team and gone and done something with them and has something to show, and that always shows that, well, they're willing to get out there and do something off their own bat.
Yeah, I think also, as it's not so relevant for somebody who's just starting out, but something I looked at was if there's gaps in a CV. Don't put, if you haven't had a great year for some reason, say that work was in short supply or something like that, but don't leave a big gap, because that looks suspicious. Because you suddenly think, well, why aren't they talking about that year, what happened there? And I think also, just don't be afraid to say that your skills are more on the social media side than the writing side or whatever, because it's increasingly rare for somebody to be all things to all people, and social media and traditional PR are two very different jobs. And I think that that's something that shouldn't ever be forgotten.
Yeah, I agree with you. Social media is a black art to me. I see what they're doing. I think, oh no, I couldn't do that. But I mean, they have, well, like we do in W Series, we have whole departments doing social media, and it's very important, because that's how you engage with fans. And it's how you get your message across now as well. It's how you the immediacy of your message is via social media. Yeah, that I mean, a few years ago you'd say, oh well, we got an article in the Daily Mail or the Daily Telegraph, but now it's how many likes you've got on your Instagram or your Twitter or your TikTok, and that's what that's what so many people are basing things on. And I put myself in the communications rather than the social and digital side. Like pictures of dogs and cats and
and mini dogs, right? Teddy bear dogs.
Yeah.
That's an inside joke, ladies and gentlemen. So anyway, I've got a question here from one of the audience members. Unfortunately, it's anonymous. I can't tell you who it's from, but it says, most of motorsport teams are based in the UK. What would be your advice for someone who lives in another country and wants to work in the industry? And then I'd like to pair that with a question from Katie Ryan, who asks, how beneficial is learning languages in your role?
I would say that an extra language or more is extremely useful. It's not crucial. I mean, you can get on, but it is extremely useful. It just helps you communicate better with different people, different areas. I think, Anne, you answer the first part of it, but I think the language side is definitely important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's a I suppose it's. I mean, when Fiona and myself started, and I was press officer of the British Grand Prix, I always had an interpreter there, because I would get a lot of journalists who didn't speak English. Yeah, I mean, oh gosh. Yeah, the first part of the question.
I mean, there are obviously lots of other teams who are based. There are Formula 3 teams, there are GT teams, there are Formula 3, Formula 2 or whatever, based all around Europe. You've obviously got your teams based over in America as well, and in Japan, you know, the sort of the racing that goes on there. So there are opportunities to sort of learn your trade with a team outside the UK. Having said that, the international language of motor racing is English, and it doesn't matter. I mean, Toyota Gazoo Racing, which Megan's company does a lot of work for, is a very good case in point. I mean, they did race in Formula One. They're now at the top of the World Endurance Championship. They have approximately 28 different nationalities of people work for the team. The international language that they all speak is English. So it doesn't matter whether your team is based in Britain, whether it's in Germany, in France, in Italy, or wherever. Debriefs with drivers are in English. The language that engineers speak to drivers is in English. The common language that they deal with officials, French would like to say it's French, but it's actually English, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. I mean, I think, as you say, every team, Formula One, W Series, all these things, you go in there and there's such a plethora of different nationalities. The only thing that people are wary of is if you need a visa, and that's the only thing. Like if you're American, I mean, I know a lot of people I speak to, I'm American, I want to do this, but no, because there's so many people want to work in it, no team is going to go to the expense and the trouble of finding you a visa, and that's the only thing. But I mean, as Fee says, you know, English is the international language, and I don't think anybody who comes now wanting to work in motorsport internationally would be able to get on without English. But yeah, as long as you don't have a visa problem, I think people welcome it, because it's so nice to see so many different nationalities, cultures, and I think you learn from each other. I mean, you know, we're a W Series, we're a series, not a race team, but all of us, we're all such a melting pot from different nationalities, and I think it makes it richer. It makes it much better that people get on and do things better, because they're not just saying, oh well, I'm English and I did this and I did that. And you learn from other people, and that's the important thing. But as I say, it's just as lot. If you can come over from America and you have a visa already, or Australia, and that it makes life a lot easier.
Definitely. I'd also probably like to add to that by saying, you know, I can obviously a lot of this of the questions that are coming through here now, and a lot of them are all surrounding the topic of Formula One. And you ladies have already mentioned it a couple of times that Formula One is not the be all and end all and the only thing going in motorsports. It is obviously the pinnacle, and it is the thing that, you know, even as a driver, I dreamt of since I was very little. But I've raced for many different teams. I've worked for many different teams. I even managed to find a racing team in the absolute middle of nowhere in Germany. So the fact of the matter is, wherever you look around in your local country, in your local city, there should be some links or ties to motorsports. And I think it's actually a great thing to start locally, get some experience with a team, even if it's an apprenticeship, just get involved and see what it's all about, and then start thinking about the bigger picture. But, you know, you definitely can start where you are. I mean, unless you're in the middle of absolutely nowhere. But again, that team that I work for in Germany was really in the middle of nowhere, and they even had a team. So I think, you know, don't worry too much about teams being in the UK, because that's not necessarily the case. Now, ladies, I had a few questions earlier with regards to apprenticeships versus degrees. Do you think it's possible to get into a comms role via an apprenticeship, or is it imperative to have a degree?
It's not what you know, it's who you know in some of these things. If you can find somebody and you can talk to somebody and get to know somebody who's in there and say, can I come and do something? It is difficult, because there are so many people who want to be in comms, and particularly, say, in Formula One. And I mean, I've known people who've ended up in the comms department who have been in catering. They've come in, they've wanted to do engineering, but it's your first foot across the door. It's your first step into the team on whatever basis you are, and then you can grow in the team. But no, it's I wish I could say that one is better than the other, but I can't. I mean, I've known people who have contacted me when they're at university, and all that they want to do is get into Formula 1. I mean, lovely Lawrence Barretto, who we've all known. I've known him since he was a 13-year-old schoolboy, and he used to come to Silverstone, and I'd get him to interview my drivers because I liked his determination and what he did. And he's one of those sort of people, and I've seen people through my years who have just been very sincere, very straightforward, very honest, and determined to come. You give them the opportunity, they've grabbed it with both hands and impressed you. And now he's obviously F1, he's Channel 4 and all sorts of things. So yeah, I can't say that one way is better than the other, but every so often you see somebody who lights up. I have to be honest and say, the way you lit up, Naomi, when you were thrown that curveball in Austria last year, you grabbed it, and from that moment on, you've grown and grown and grown, and everybody wants you involved in their series. And that's that's to me is more important than any degree or anything. It's what you see in a person when they're given an opportunity and they take it.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Annie.
I think Megan mentioned it as well earlier, that what everybody's looking for really is experience. So you can have a really great degree, and that's always going to stand you in good stead, but actually it's getting your foot in the door. And as Anne was saying, it's just it's if you're determined enough, if this is what you decide you really want, and that's very often the mark of how much you will succeed, is how determined you are. If you're determined, you'll find a way. You'll find a way of knocking on those doors, or keep it. And somebody sent a message earlier saying, should I just keep knocking on the door? And it's like, yes, keep knocking on the door. If you're determined and you're good at what you do, and you can eventually show what you do, you'll succeed.
Yeah, I say, like, I feel like for me, yes, I went to university, but I feel like they don't teach you what happens in the real world at university. You sort of you learn from books, and a lot of the books are outdated, especially from what I learned, on my master's degree and my PR degree. Yes, I learned sort of the basics and like the history of it, but it didn't teach me how to write a press release. It didn't teach me how I should go about with taking people to interviews and things like that. So again, it's all about experience and just knocking on that door, and just keep knocking until people get sick of you. And networking is probably the biggest thing that I learned that you had to do. If you just go to a race weekend, go and speak to teams, go and speak to the person who sort of runs the track, who does like the social media at a track or something. And if that's what you want to do, go and have a conversation with them, find out how they got into it, and just take any advice that people give you, and go to events. So Girls on Track UK networking events are great for that. So I met quite a few people at the first in-person one after COVID, and through that I got a meeting with Louise Goodman at one of the BTCC rounds, spoke to her, got advice from her, and then sort of it pushed me to keep on knocking up those doors and ask people, do you have experience? Do you have work experience for me? Can I come and help you out for a weekend? I'll do it for free, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Really good point.
Fantastic.
Yeah. I also probably want to add to that by saying that, my probably the best racing opportunity I ever got was just because I was in a, let's call it, desperate situation in my career, didn't have any budget, didn't know what I was doing. So I just started showing up to every racetrack that I could reach within reachable distance by car. And, the lesson that I learned from that is that if you want to catch the train, you must be in the train station. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you need to be at a racing track, but just come listen to these types of webinars, get involved in networking events, contact your local ASN if you're not sure, because I've seen some people put in the comments they are in the middle of nowhere and there's no racing teams. Contact your local ASNs, find out who you can get in contact with, and just be there, be in the station. Now, I don't want to get too involved in the advice section. We only have 5 minutes left. So ladies, I'm going to move it forward to our little quick fire advice section. So if you can keep your answers quick and to the point, that would be very helpful. There's 4 questions coming your way. The first one is, what is your advice for a person who wants to get into a press officer role?
Again, determination, just keep doing everything you can to gain experience, even if it's free, you're doing it for nothing. Just never give up and look far and wide. And as you say, look at your local motor club. They all run race meetings. They might want help on social media, and just try and find people who might need a little bit of help, and you would be very useful to them.
I don't think I can better what Anne's just said. That's exactly right.
Okay, perfect. Well, then let's move on to the next one. The next one is, what is one thing you wish that you would have done better to prepare yourself for this role in the early days?
Oh, I think in the early days, I've got a very thick skin now.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you let drivers, mainly drivers, get to you and you think, oh God, am I doing the right thing? No, be prepared, be confident in what you're doing, and don't let some difficult driver, I won't mention names, make you doubt that you're doing the right thing.
Oh, to add on to that, I think as well, learning to say no sometimes as well. You can't please everyone. You can't please every single journalist that has a last minute request for an interview. If your driver has to get in the car in 5 minutes, there's no way they can do an interview with someone. And I learned that, you've got to say no. I like pleasing everyone, but, there is a cut-off point sometimes.
No, I think that's absolutely right. It's just, don't think you can be all things to all people. Just remember, one of my previous bosses said to me once that a driver is an employee of a team like everybody else, and they might be better paid than you because they're doing a job that's more dangerous than yours, but they are an employee who should be treated like an employee, and it just means don't put them on a pedestal. Just, they're there to do a job the same as you're there to do a job, and if you're doing your job properly, they should respect you for that in the same way that you respect them when they're doing a good job.
Great. Okay. I think everybody answered the question. Now, the last one is, what is the best advice that you have been given in your career? If you can remember.
Well, I don't take yourself too seriously. Enjoy what you're doing and do the best you can. That's really, I think, Fiona and myself both had this amazing person called Andrew Marriott, who we worked for, and who was about to bring a book out, I understand. And he always gave good advice. He was always there. It was always a very positive man, and and supported us, and let us get on and just do our own thing.
Well, I think apart from Andrew's advice from earlier on, one piece of advice that I've never forgotten was given to me by a truck driver from Lotus in Formula One years and years ago, and he sort of said, and it's particularly relevant to women. He said, it's quite tricky for a female working in motor racing, because you've got to be one of the boys in the sense you've got to get on with everybody and put up with the jokes or the language or things like that. But you've also got to behave like a nun. You can't afford to lose your reputation because of what might be in front of you, let's say. And I think that's something that's really important to hold on to. If you want a career in this business and you want to be taken seriously, you have to take that part of it seriously as well.
I think one thing for me, very simple, is just believe in yourself. You can do it, and if you believe in yourself, then the world's your oyster, and you can do anything you put your mind to.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, ladies. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. So I'd like to thank our wonderful, inspirational guests today. I'd like to thank Girls on Track UK as well as Motorsports UK for making this event possible. And of course, I want to thank everyone who participated in today's webinar. Remember that the Girls on Track community is free to join. They now have 5,500 members, and they would love to welcome anyone who isn't already a member. So for those of you who are interested interested in joining, the link will be in the chat box for you to join, as well as a link to the Girls on Track UK newsletter. Now, before we go, I'd like to ask you one tiny last favor. When this call ends, there'll be a survey for you guys to complete. It'll help Girls on Track find out what their members want to see in the future. So please, please, please fill that in and let us have your feedback. And finally, thank you all so much for joining us this evening. Make sure to check your mailboxes to find out what August's theme will be. And on that note, have a lovely evening, everyone. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you. Thank you, Naomi.
Thank you, Naomi.
Bye.
Bye.